Hello everybody, this is Tolki, and today we're looking at fighter items. By fighters, I mean AD fighters, fighter champions who want to build AD, but also some HP, because they're usually melee champions who want some sort of ability haste because they are cooldown reliance. Those are champions like Renekton, Riven, and a slew of other champions that can be played that way. Champions are a very interesting class because they have their mythic component Iron Spike Whip, which is pretty hard to evaluate. You don't get as much AD as you're paying for, but you get a decent active. And then they have four very, very good mythics. I put Trinity Force here because I feel like it can be a fighter item in a lot of situations. We've seen in the past even Yasuo buying it. It's an item that can see play on a lot of melee damage dealing champions. Let's start with Gold Drinker. Gold Drinker is a very good item ever since they've buffed it, which was very recent. If you want this exact mix of stats, it's a good item. This means Gold Drinker, as it has Omnivamp, goes with damage. Omnivamp is better the more damage you deal, and so Gold Drinker is a damage-oriented fighter build mythic. It gives you a lot of ability haste inside the build, and with the Omnivamp and the high AD and the high HP, you're going to survive for a long time. Straight Breaker is also good, but it's a really weird mix of stats because Stride Breaker gives you attack speed, and that's where quite a bit of the gold value comes from. So it's in a weird spot. If you want the attack speed, it's pretty good. So it's good on Gnar because it's a ranged champion. It's good on Nocturne because you actually can hit people once you stick to them for at least a few seconds. But I think it's slightly worse on champions like, Renekton, who don't really make use of attack speed that much. Then we get to Divine Thunder, which is the weirdest of all, in that if you count the proc as double chain procs, it looks like a very good item and it heals you. But the issue is you need to be proccing it regularly, and if you're a melee champion, that's usually pretty hard. And also it scales with max HP, so if you go for a Divine Thunder, ideally you'd want resistances, so the heal is more valuable, and so you would want to be going into a tank build. But if you're going for a tank build, does Divine Thunder really makes sense? Something that needs you to hit a spell every 1.5 seconds? Things usually have long cooldowns, so I feel like Divine Thunder is a good item that has few users because it's so weird and it wants to go more into a tank fighter build than a damage fighter build, but tank fighters don't really want to be building a Shin item, so it doesn't really make sense. And to top it all off, we have Trinity Force, which is once again it's not really a fighter item, but it does give HP and AD, which is and ability haste, which are the stats fighters usually want, with even more attack speed than Stride Breaker. And I think if you want to be building those stats, it's a great item at the moment. It just gives so much stats because you get ability haste, you get high attack speed, you get decent damage, you get the move speed on hit, you get stacking AD, and you get a 200% Spellblade passive. Once again, you need to be able to make good use of it, but I think if you make good use of the stats of Trinity Force and of the Shin passive, it's maybe the best mythic in the game. I think in particular, I want to try it out on Yone. I want to try, a Zeal Triforce IE build on Yone because it sounds super sexy to me. And I think Trinity Force, it's a bit like that's the issue with Fighter Mythic. They all look good, but they're also hard to really make good because with Gold Drinker, you want to make use of the Omnivamp and you want to be dealing damage. With Stride Breaker, you want to make use of the attack speed and you want to be continuously auto-attacking people and having a good reason to do that. With Divine Thunderer, you want to proc it regularly, and I just don't know. It's hard to make them properly fit and be used to their full potential. And then when we go to the Fighter's item, that's where the issue lies. Fighter's items are not as good as their mythics. Hex Drinker is the shining star. If you want the stats, if you want magic resist and AD, it's so good, get Hex Drinker. It's the opposite of Mage's components, which are terrible for defensive items. Last Whisper, if we assume here for the calculation, it's a very efficient item. It's going to come back later. And then as you can see, you don't get that much stats. Campux Chainsword, it's okay if you need Grievous Wounds, just like all the Grievous Wounds items, it's an okay item, not great. Guardian Angel, you're paying for the passive, which is very valuable, but you are taking a big hit on your combat stats, so it's more of an item for when you're ahead and you are going to go into a team fight, and even if you die, you know you can win the team fight because you already have more stats. It's a good insurance, and it's a good item, but it's hard to really put a number on that passive. Hullbreaker, it gives insane stats when you're alone, but it doesn't give the right ones. It gives you magic resist and armor when you're separated, and you're paying a lot of HP in the item's price. If you're a split pusher, the only thing you need is to be able to kill people under the turrets. Like, if you are hitting the turret, you're okay. If people are ganking you, normally you should be okay. That's why you play a side laner, because you have tools against this. You don't want more armor and magic resist when you're in the side lane. It doesn't really make sense if you're trying, to push your advantage. And if you're team fighting, this item is not good. So it's in a weird spot where I feel like it's good when you're behind and you need to be able to survive in a side lane to create pressure, which can happen. Then this can kind of salvage your game. And it's still okay stats for teamfight. They're not good, but they're still playable if it's a 2v2 or a 3v3. But it's just a weird item where I fail to see the right use case for it. And when they announced it, it had quite a few more stats, and now it's doomed. Looking at Morph Malmortius, it's the upgrade of Hex Drinker. It's not as sexy as Hex Drinker, but it's a decent upgrade. But Hex Drinker already gives you 35 magic resist, so usually you won't need to be upgrading it that fast. You can just stay on it, and the 35 magic resist make you happy against magic damage. Silvermere Down is the good upgrade of QSS, as opposed to the other one that I forgot the name of. You pay 400 for the combined cost, and you get 1580 and 150 HP and an upgraded QSS for 400 gold. It's a great item that's not slept on because people know it's good. It's just not something people finish often, and you can afford to finish it. If you want the stats, if you want 80 HP and magic resist, it's great. It's actively great. Then we move to the superstar, Sterak's Gauge. I have maybe a bit of a controversial opinion. So first, this is a teamfight only item. If you're not teamfighting with this, if you don't have multiple stacks of Bloodlust when you activate your shield, it's trash. You need 2 or 3 people at least to be hitting you for it to make sense. But even then, is it really that much better than a Black Cleaver, than even a Hullbreaker? It's not. It's better for sure. It's just not that much better. That's the issue, because it doesn't really give you more stats. It just doesn't make it sexier. And in particular, if you went already for one of the fighter mythics, you get a lot of HP, and you want resist when you have that much HP. You don't really want more HP, because then flood penetration is just too good against you. You want to have some resistances in the mix, and Sterak's Gauge doesn't really bring that. I think the items has been nerfed quite a bit too much, and at the moment it's not the best teamfight item. The best teamfight item, I think, is Black Cleaver, as I'm gonna come to it. And if you really want just tankiness in teamfight, Gargoyle Stoneplate is usually a good option that will cover in the tank items. Next, Death Dance. I just feel like it's kind of a trap, because the passive is not that good, and you're paying full price for it. Like, you just get baseline efficiency from the item. You don't get any stats bonus, which is very bad on a 3k 100 gold, 3k1 gold legendary item. So I think Death Dance is usually kind of a trap. If you want armor and AD, I have the item for you here. It's called Guardian Angel, and that's quite a bit better. Then we move on to Black Cleaver, which is kind of controversial. I think Black Cleaver used to be completely broken. It used to be a very stupid item that has been nerfed, and people now are kind of sleeping on it. Because if you want AD HP ability haste, it's a good item. You get more HP but less AD than Sterak's Gauge. You get more ability haste, much more ability haste. 25 is nothing to scoff at. And then you get the passive that is still very good. If you're hitting the same target as your carry, you're pretty much giving them a last whisper after, of course, you've done all the stacks, which is 6 stacks. It's a lot, of course. But even without that, it's a good item. That's the thing. So compared, to Death Dance, which gives you baseline stats and then a passive that's not that useful, then you get Black Cleaver, which gives you baseline stats and a passive that can have great upside. If you're hitting, in particular, if you're a top laner playing against the tank and it's going to be really a front-to-back type of game, it's good. So I think Black Cleaver is very good if you're going to hit targets with decently high armor, and that's good because it's kind of an aura effect. You should rarely have more than one black cleaver on a team, but you should often have exactly one black cleaver on a team on your frontline champion that's gonna hit the other frontline in the case of a front-to-back fight. Then we move to Serylda's Grudge that I put there. It's a weird item that is very good if you really want the armor penetration, and then the slow is a great added bonus. So it's a good item if you consider that you really want the armor penetration. Like, we are considering that Last Whisper has the same gold efficiency as Zeal here, which is very high. We estimate Last Whisper is a huge spike, and if Last Whisper is a huge spike for you in this game, then Serylda's Grudge is good. And to top it all off, we have the two Hydras, and they don't look very sexy, you know. Ravenous Hydra gives you a decent AoE bonus, but once again, you just get baseline stats. And Titanic Hydra, even counting the bonus AD you get from the bonus HP, it's not that much bonus AD, and then you have the passive, which, while nice, I'm not sure how efficient it is in most cases. I think it's a good item if you really are landing a lot of auto attacks, but that's rare that this type of champion class, you know, champions that want to have a lot of HP also want to be hitting a lot of auto attacks. I feel like that's a weird combination of things to happen in a game. So that's it for Fighter's item. This is already 11 minutes, which I didn't expect, but the TLDR is Fighter Mythics are great, but a bit hard to use, because some of them give you, you know, weird stats, and Fighter Legendaries are not that good, unfortunately, and they all have their use cases, and they can be good in their own special use cases, but they're not as generally good as a lot of the mages Legendaries, for example. So that's it for today. No super broken build here that I can recommend you like mages, but I think some ideas that you can bring with you to your next game. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share,